Okay. Okay, so I'm recording to the cloud. I hope I didn't not let somebody in.
No,
Anybody else knocking on our door here?
no,
I don't see anybody else.
you're okay.
Okay, well, it is, it's 10:34. Here, wait a minute. Here comes Linda Kevorkian. Okay, this is early for Linda. You know, some people are notoriously a little bit. Okay, all right.
All I did was turn up the volume. I don't know.
Got out of the
Who's
shower.
that?
I don't know. Okay,
On the-
Linda
Clicking all the way, but-
Starbust, your picture's not showing.
That could have been why you were
You
only
see,
getting
Mitchell's picture is showing either because I don't want my face up there.
one channel. on the
Okay,
other thing.
all right.
Just got out of the shower. So.
I
Oh,
might
okay.
have.
Now can I turn off
If I
my
can't
picture?
fix
I
it,
don't
I'll
want-
go to the iPad. Okay.
Okay, all right.
Just go to here and click stop video.
Okay,
There, oh, then they won't
Thank
see
you.
whoever that was.
that
There
was
you-
me.
That was you, Vicky Craig?
Yes.
Where are you
Pretty
from, Vicky?
Traverse City, but that's recent. I haven't met up with this branch yet. I
Okay.
moved from Grand Rapids and before
Oh.
that, a little bit of time in Big Rapids, but anyway, that's me. Hi.
Oh, boy, I wish we had a branch in Grand Rapids.
I
yeah.
know it was hard when they broke up.
Yeah,
Um,
well, they sort of just flew away, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that we'll go ahead and get started because there's an awful lot of information to be covered. And I think that Mary, most of you know that Mary Pollock is our legislative, what do you call it? What do we call you, Mary?
Government Relations Coordinator.
There it is, Government Relations Report. That's the person. She looks out for us in Michigan in the legislature and comes back to the board and says, you know, these are the things that are going on, and I spoke about this and this and this, and these are the things I think you should be thinking about. And so when we saw this huge list of petitions and saw what they can do with those petitions, and that fact that when you sign a petition, it doesn't mean just that it's going to be on the ballot, but maybe the legislature will say, hey, we got all these people, we'll just go ahead and make a law about this and then go and make it and change it. So I thought Mary could explain those things to us. And so I'm going to just let Mary go, and let's all the rest of us, let's just mute ourselves. Okay.
Okay, everybody mute. And I have put my phone in the towel drawer in my other room so it won't ring in the middle of this. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you've made me co-host or something and it will come up. I don't see it coming up, so I'm not.
It is.
It is.
Is it coming up? Okay.
Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint.
All
You
right.
can't see it?
No, but yeah, I see it now. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
All right. I'm not going to be able to see you as I'm talking. So if somebody puts something in the chat or something like that, someone else will need to alert me, Sally. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm appearing today with I have a boo-boo on my face, you know, they removed something and I have a big bandage on it, but it should get better in a week or so. So I wanted to remind you about our mission always to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. And I underline advocacy because that's what our public policy program is all about, taking action to advance our issues.
Okay, Mary?
Yes.
You did not, you're talking about your second slide, but you didn't move it to your second slide.
Yeah, I moved it on my screen, but not yours. So let me
Why?
go back
Okay. Go.
and see if, does that do it?
No,
No, it might help if you go into presentation mode.
yes.
How do I do that? Is
Leah?
that in PowerPoint or?
Yes, yes, it's in PowerPoint. Yeah, okay.
I think down at the very bottom of your screen, next to where you see 83%, right to the left of that is an icon that I think is supposed to look like a full screen.
It worked for a second and then it went back to number one, Mary.
How about that one? What are you seeing now?
Number one.
Just the first one.
It's still not in presentation mode.
No, it's not. Isn't that up at the top?
Now it is, now it's gone to 2.
Mhm.
But now I don't have it in large.
It's,
Yeah,
Not in full
yeah.
screen.
It is full, it's fine.
yeah, but you gotta move it. You gotta make sure you move it as you go along. If you
All
don't
right,
have a
now, are you
presentation.
seeing full screen on the first slide?
Nope, yes, we're seeing it, but not full screen, but that's okay. It's big enough.
Mhm.
I'd like to do it full screen.
Well, it says here, you go from the beginning and from the current slide. You see that up at the top? Leah, would you help here?
Yeah, well, and I use a Mac, so this looks a little different from what I typically see. What happens if you? I would think that from beginning ought to do it, but
Yeah, that's
Right.
what I thought. That's what I started with.
You gotta make sure you're in presentation mode. Click on it and see what happens. Mhm.
no,
Do you see the second screen?
No,
no,
no, you're gonna have to make sure that you go down and click on each screen as you talk.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, all right, because it was not changing before. Okay,
Now you can see it, but not in the large screen, right?
it's pretty big. It's big enough everybody can see it.
Yeah, okay, well,
If you want, well, you have to give me control then. If you want, you could let me, well, I can't share it because I don't have it. So there you go.
yeah, well, okay, we're just gonna put up with this.
Okay,
A little bit
fine.
smaller screen than full screen.
That's fine. That's fine.
So we're doing advocacy when we do this, and our 3 public policy priorities, biennial public policy priorities are promoting gender fairness in public education, economic self-sufficiency for all women, and the one that takes up the most time for me is guaranteeing equality, individual rights, and social justice for a diverse and inclusive society. So I always like to show this because there's a difference between being political and being partisan. We are by policy a nonpartisan organization. That means in the 501c4 IRS world, we do not endorse candidates or political parties, but we do voter education. We do candidate forums, we do candidate questionnaires. We consider all candidates to participate when we do these things. We do support and endorse issues based on our biennial, our public policy priorities adopted every 2 years by an every person vote. And we advocate for their advancement. So that's being political, but that's not being partisan. Of course, individual members have their own political party preference, but AAUW does not. Our preferences lie with our issues, and sometimes those coalesce around a political party, and sometimes they don't. So that's the difference between being political and being partisan. We are nonpartisan. So here's how to get involved. I post almost every day on the AAUW of Michigan Lobby Corps Facebook group page. You can join the Public Policy Committee in your branch or start one if you don't have it. And you can be on my Lobby Corps mailing list. We have a meeting once a month, virtual, and lots of information is shared there. And of course, I hope you all are on the AAUW's 2-minute activist, which you can find by going to the national website and putting in 2-minute activist in the search feature. And then always you can find state legislative information at www.legislature.mi.gov. And then Leah has reorganized our website, AAUW-MIsh.org, and there's a nice public policy link there with lots of good information. So to understand petition drives in Michigan, you have to know a little constitutional law. There's a thing called an initiated statute, something different called a constitutional amendment, and something else called a referendum. In an initiated statute, a group has to collect 8% of the signatures according to the last gubernatorial general election. This time it's 340,047 good, valid voter signatures to put on a petition within a 180-day window period. And that bunches boxes, I can assure you, 50, 75 boxes of petitions are due by June 1st. Now, once the voter signatures are verified and they have, the Bureau of Elections has certified this 340,000+ signatures, the proposed petition drive goes to the legislature, where by a simple majority within 40 legislative session days, that proposed voter initiated law becomes law without the governor's signature. It doesn't go to her for a veto or an approval. So if not approved by the legislature in 40 days, it goes to the ballot. Now, typically, the Bureau of Elections is pretty slow at reviewing signatures, and since the legislature doesn't meet but for one day in July and August, typically these initiated laws get sorted out in August and early September. By some date in early September, the ballot needs to be finalized for printing. So that's why all this kind of time periods are published ahead of time. It doesn't give the Bureau of Elections much time to check all those signatures, so they do a sample. They draw off a random sample of 500 pages and then look at those voters, and if the sample comes up with the right proportion of valid signatures, and there's no objection, then they're good, and they go to the legislature for the 40-day session days. Often there's a challenge at this point by those who oppose a voter-initiated statute. So it isn't just the end of it when the signatures are verified. A constitutional amendment proposal is different. I don't call these things ballot proposals anymore. I call them petition drives, because the initiated statute format may or may not go to the ballot. I believe 10 of 18 since 1987 have not gone to the ballot. So there's a likelihood that it won't go to the ballot. And you'll see some of these are sponsored by GOP-led or influenced organization or financed organizations. And we have a GOP majority in both the House and Senate. So those are not likely to, if they get to the legislative stage, they're not likely to get to the ballot. So a constitutional amendment is a little bit different creature. It requires 10% of the voter turnout in the last gubernatorial election And that's 425,059 signatures for this cycle because we had such a huge turnout in 2018. These numbers have really gone up. But a constitutional, voter-initiated constitutional amendment must go to the ballot. The signatures, petitions, et cetera, are due by July 11th. And believe me, if lots of them get handed in, Bureau of Elections is going to be scrambling. There's another thing that's really not at issue this year, but I thought I'd mention it. This is the power of voters in referendum. It's the power to approve or reject laws enacted by the legislature. As you will see, there's it comes into play in at least one of the ballot proposals. I think, no, that was initiated law. So it comes in one of the petition drives. So the power of referendum does not extend to acts making appropriations. So we cannot do a petition drive to repeal by referendum an appropriation. And so people use this as a method to make a petition drive referendum proof. So a referendum only requires 5% of the total voters cast for candidates for governor. This year is 212 plus valid signatures. So there is a thing established in the 1850 Constitution called the Michigan Board of State Canvassers. And it has 4 members. There you see them in red. Norm Schinkel is the current chair. He's a former legislator. I believe when he was working, he was in the retirement real estate business. Vice chair is Mary Ellen Gurwitz. She's a new member of the board, only met once or twice. Tony Daunt is former director of the Freedom Fund and currently leading Fair Michigan, kind of the Republican slant on redistricting. And Jeanette Bradshaw, who I believe is a teacher, if I'm not mistaken. So the duties of the board of interest to us are that they canvass state level, what that website calls ballot proposal petitions, but they really are any petition. Assigning ballot designations and adopting ballot language for statewide ballot proposals. So those are the 2 issues that, 2 of their duties that affect petition drives in Michigan. So count them. There are 16 petition drives in Michigan going on right now. And I believe that's a record. It's a record in my experience. So I just give a phrase describing each of them. The ones in red are the ones that the AAUW of Michigan board has voted to oppose. Unlike Michigan 2, Secure My Vote, Let My Kids Learn A and B, and Audit Michigan. The ones in green, Raise Michigan, Reproductive Freedom for All, and Promote the Vote 2022 are the 3 petition drives that we are supporting. The latest, number 14 down here, was just introduced last week and is not yet finalized, but I want to talk about it because it's kind of interesting later on in this presentation. So you may have heard about this. Certainly anybody active in the petition drive business has heard about this. On the lower right-hand corner of this slide, you'll see a typical union bug that's put on documents that are printed in a union printers by a union printer, a unionized printer. And it's usually extremely small. You can hardly read it. And it resembles a small insect, so they call it a bug. On February 11th, and I was in the front row to see this craziness, lawyers representing organizations opposing Raise Michigan and Reproductive Freedom for All brought up the issue at the Board of State Canvassers meeting that the Union Bugs letters were not 8-point font. The law requires an 8-point font minimum. Now, decades, for decades, people have put Union Bugs very small on their petitions or supporting materials, and it never was raised as an issue. But this time it was, and the board, being 2-2 Republicans, Democrats, deadlocked on approving the petitions for Raise Michigan and Reproductive Freedom for All. And so without having 3 votes, their form of their petitions were not approved. So there has been a lawsuit filed to overrule the board. Secretary of State Benson has asked the Attorney General for her opinion, for a formal opinion. Now, in Michigan, like federal government, we have a federal constitution. We have a ex post facto law, constitutional provision that says you cannot pass laws and then prosecute behavior before the law was passed. So I imagine all the current candidates and petition drives using a very small Union Bug are very interested in the outcome of this lawsuit and hoping that the ex post facto provision in Michigan Constitution will be upheld. So the first one out of the gate was Unlock Michigan 2. Unlock Michigan 1 went after the emergency powers of the governor during a pandemic like we have. And Unlock Michigan 2 goes after the public health code to reduce the authority of the director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and local health officers to control an infectious disease by issuing emergency orders. When the governor lost her power the summer or fall of 2021, she began using this public health code. And that's when Unlock Michigan 2 went into action. So this proposed initiated statute limits emergency orders of the governor or your local health official to 28 days, unless the legislature for the governor and the local county commission or school board, whatever, for a local governing body extends it past 28 days. So all these mask mandates that have been put into place by school boards, if this were to pass and become law, the school board would have to extend it after 28 days. So AAUW opposes this provision and urges you not to sign it. We're not doing any campaign, out there, but we're just urging people not to sign it. And I might add here that petition gatherers are under no legal compunction to tell the truth in describing the petition that they are asking you to sign. So you need to read the 100 words to make sure you know what you're signing. And because this is an initiated statute and it's sponsored by Republicans, likely the GOP legislature will vote it into law if it reaches them, and it will not go to the governor for a potential veto. So that's Unlock Michigan 2. So there are 5 election-related petition drives going on right now. And in my humble opinion, this reflects the apprehension out there about the 2020 election processes that we adopted in 2018 in Proposal 3, Promote the Vote. The most apprehension is caused by the no reason absentee voting, when only seniors and the disabled and people out of town could use absentee voting, there was not this apprehension and focus on every little potential detail. But now there is, since 60, I think 60% of the 2020 voters were absentee voters. And there's continued suspicion that the 2020 presidential election was fraudulent, despite audits and investigations. As recently as last week, the Legislative Auditor General released a report of his audit and found, a few little snafus here and there, but generally no problem. There were not huge numbers of dead people voting or that kind of thing. The press releases after his report, of course, reflect the writers' differing opinions on what he found. And there is a fear of these new, younger absentee voters who we had record turnout. 71% of all registered voters voted, and we've never had that high a turnout. So these are new voters to anybody doing politics. So to me, those are the three factors about causing this these 5 election-related petition drives. So I wanted to start with what I view as the granddaddy one. Last year, the Republican Senate caucus released 39 election-related bills seeking to change election law in Michigan concerning many things, a lot of them about absentee voting, drop boxes, all kinds of things. That got the headlines, but over in the House, the Republicans in the House were doing something similar, but not with such a great publicity splash. So what I call the misnamed Secure My Vote, the governor had vetoed the individual pieces of this legislation coming out of the Senate and House. And so Secure My Vote kind of puts all of those ideas together into one petition drive. And the one aspect of it that they're advertising as though we have a big problem with voter identification, which we do not have. The first thing that they're saying it would do, and it's playing to their base voters, is it removes the affidavit of identity option if an in-person voter forgets their photo ID or doesn't have one. Those voters could only cast a provisional ballot, and they'd have to go into their election official's office within 6 days, show an ID and a proof of residency, something that an in-person voter doesn't usually have to show if they want their vote to count. And the follow-up on provisional votes, one of my Lansing clerk told me, is about 6% show up within, 15% show up within the 6 days. So it's virtually, people do not follow up. They don't have time, they don't have transportation, whatever it is. So roughly 11,400 voters in 2020 voted by affidavit. We have had affidavit voting available in Michigan for at least 2 decades.
Yes.
So not many people avail themselves of it. ACLU has pointed to studies showing that up to 25% of voting age Blacks do not have a state issued ID versus 8% of white adults. And there's many reasons for not having a state issued ID, from the courthouse burning down where your birth certificate is. That happened to me, but the state of Texas provided another one that was official. But there are many people born at home not using a doctor, and they were don't have a birth certificate. It's a lot of reasons. Anyway, it's kind of a complicated topic, but it doesn't affect that many people. But this is the lead issue that Secure My Vote is going out on. The thought by many who suspect there was fraud in the 2020 election that we need to crack down on those folks that aren't showing their ID, and that would make a big difference. The petition Secure My Vote prohibits, to me, this is the biggest problem with the thing. It would prohibit the Secretary of State or local clerks from sending an unsolicited absentee ballot application, not a ballot, an application for an absentee ballot to voters, or even providing a web link to print it off. It would not prohibit political parties, special interests, or advocacy groups from sending absentee ballot applications. Now, what is the problem that they think is happening with the wide availability of absentee ballot applications? Absolutely too many people are voting, and these are new voters, and we're suspicious of them. And so we're going to put up barriers. That's what's going on in their thinking. So, you know, this is kind of crazy in a digital age not to have a web link. So it would require the voter to reach out to their local election official to have an application sent to them. That's what it would do in effect. A new one that even concerns the AARP, they were on a statewide call, town hall yesterday, I believe it was, I was on that. They want, and Secure My Vote would require voters to give a partial social security number for voter registration. You already have to give your state ID number, your driver's license number. And now they would add to it the last 4 digits of your social security number. For that reason, AARP is really against this Secure My Vote, because it's a voter identity potential fraud could happen. Because all those social security number, partial social security numbers would be stored by the Secretary of State's driver's license division. You know, it's just one more place where your social security number is out there. It doesn't take much for those who want to do harm to you to figure out the other 5 numbers using computers. So Secure My Vote would also, if adopted, require voters to write their state ID number or the last 4 digits of their social number on an application for an absentee ballot. If they don't, the voter would be provided a provisional absentee ballot and go through that 6 days after. Well, they wouldn't even know actually to go in. But at any rate, that's what this says. Now, the fact is, right now, we don't require an ID or ID number for absentee ballot applications. You just put your name, address, and signature and date. The clerks match your signature on that application against the signatures they have on file. And because when you registered to vote, you had to provide an ID number and a signature to register to vote. So they've got it on file. Now, I just read, just before getting on this call, in Texas, they passed, the legislature there passed this ID number requirement, social security number requirement for absentee ballot applications and voting on by absentee ballot. And 17% of the mail-in ballots had to be rejected because they didn't have matching ID numbers or last 4 digits of social numbers. So it really does suppress the absentee vote. If Secure My Vote becomes law, it would prohibit private financial assistance to local governments to run elections. And this is in response to Mark Zuckerberg's foundation offering grants to election administrators in 2020. My local, where I live, they used it to buy PPE, you know, those acrylic screens. Other places bought letter openers, or if it was a big jurisdiction, a new high-speed tabulator. I mean, they could use it for anything. It wasn't restricted. And this was given to Republican and Democrats. It was kind of nonpartisan. Nevertheless, those backing Secure My Vote want to prohibit private funding. And Progress Michigan did a survey and found that 20% of the precinct voting places are in churches who are usually donating the space. So that would be prohibited under this provision. So one of the things that Secure My Vote did cleverly was they put a $3 million appropriation in this proposed law. And that was supposed to finance free IDs for anybody who objected to raise the issue of people can't afford an ID. But it made this whole thing referendum proof if it passes, gets its signatures and passes the legislature. But the thing is, currently the state charges $10 for a state ID, but waives the fee for low-income residents receiving state aid. So there already is a program to help finance state IDs for people, indigenous people. And here's a little bit about the background here of Secure My Vote. They share an office address with its biggest funder, the Michigan Guardians of Democracy. Michigan Guardians gave $750,000 to both Secure My Vote and Unlock Michigan 2, and $100,000 to a private school funding initiative, Let My Kids Learn. The Michigan Republican Party conducted mailing work for the group, which was worth $140,000. And GOP Chair Ron Weiser personally donated $80,000 to the petition committee. So this is a kind of a Republican thing. There are individual donors. Now, because they filed last fall, they had to file a campaign finance report. And that's why we know where their money is coming from. These aren't allegations, they're in their report. So that's the misnamed Secure My Vote. Another one that we're opposing is called Audit Michigan. And this is to transfer election authority from the Department of State and the county clerks and their board of canvassers in each county to an audit board of 10 Republican and 10 Democratic delegates, precinct delegates, selected by the House Speaker and the House Minority Leader. This board would hire a third party to conduct audits of 2020 election and future elections. In other words, it's reaching back and going forward. It sets up a grand jury consisting of 7 members of the audit board selected by the Speaker and 6 selected by the Minority Leader. It could issue arrest warrants for noncompliance and criminal immunity for cooperation. And honestly, the people sponsoring this are kind of well known to be part of people who think Trump won in 2020. So we urge you not to sign this one. So the one we are supporting is Promote the Vote 2022. It would recognize voting as a fundamental. It would continue our current practice of voter identity through either a photo ID or a signed statement. You could apply for an application for to vote absentee in all elections, and the clerks wouldn't have to notify you each time. It would require state-funded postage and a tracking system for absentee applications and ballots. It would require state-funded absentee ballot drop boxes for every 15,000 voters. In some jurisdictions, they put out multiple drop boxes, all centered around the city clerk's office. And some of them were inside and locked after 5 o'clock. And I mean, there are all kinds of problems that need to be solved with drop boxes. And one of them is how many there are and where they are located. Promote the Vote 2022, which is, after all, a constitutional amendment because it's designed to kind of undo what Secure My Vote, should it pass the legislature, is trying to do. So, and Audit Michigan. So it's kind of, a constitutional provision has greater preference in law than a statute. So another thing it does is it would say only election officials can conduct post-election audits, not private companies. And that gets at the Audit Michigan requirement. One of the good things I think that a lot of people would appreciate is Promote the Vote requires 9 days of early in-person voting, where you actually put your ballot in a tabulator and you can see whether, you know, you overvoted or there was a stray mark or something and it rejects it. When you vote by absentee, you often don't know you've made a mistake because you've handed it over to somebody else to put it in the tabulator. So 9 8-hour days of early in-person voting, I think, is the major feature here that people would like to hear about. It does allow donations to fund elections from private, but they have to be disclosed. And this third dot here, it counteracts Audit Michigan, because it would, canvassing boards would be the only ones to certify election results. And they could only base that on official records of those votes cast and not some made up percentage or that kind of thing. And it prevents some of the manipulation to have the legislature substitute its judgment for the election board of canvassers. The AAUW of Michigan board voted to support this on February 19th. It is backed by Promote the Vote Michigan, which did the 2018 Proposal 3, the AAUW of Michigan, the League of Women Voters of Michigan. All voting is local. And most importantly, Voters Not Politicians, which sponsored the 2018 Proposal 2 to end gerrymandering in Michigan and establish a Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission. Voters Not Politicians is where, if you want to work on Promote the Vote 2022, they are committed to getting 200,000 of the 500,000 signatures that is needed to put this thing on the ballot. So I would go to votersnotpoliticians.com to sign up to be involved in advancing this to the ballot. It's going to be difficult, and we're going to have to do it all in 3 months or so. So another one that we're supporting, and we've done this in the past, this is raising the minimum wage in Michigan. Right now it's $9.87 an hour, and it won't go to $12 by 2030. And this proposal, which is a initiated statute, it doesn't require as many signatures. It would increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2027, and then index it to inflation, make the tipped wage and minimum wage over 6 years, and eliminate the sub-minimum wages that are currently legal. This one has the backing of a national organization, Raise the Wage, and they have had, they had to file a fundraising report already, and they have over $1 million donated by the national. Now, we backed this organization, the same one sponsoring it this time, did the same similar kind of thing in 2018, and you recall that this was thwarted by the Adopt and Amend in November of 2018. They after the election, They adopted the proposal that within the 40 session days that the Republican controlled legislature had. They adopted it, and then they amended it with a whole new statute that lowered all the minimum wage and strung it out over time and didn't have indexing, etc. So this one is raisethewage.mi.org to sign up to help. I've contacted both Promote the Vote, Voters Not Politicians, and Raise the Wage Michigan to tell them of our support. We supported in 2018, and we're doing it again. This is the one that would counteract what is happening at the national level. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court has a case before it out of Mississippi to ban abortions after 15 weeks. And because of the current makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court, it is thought that they will either overturn Roe v. Wade and uphold Mississippi's right to do this, or they will find some way to cut back on reproductive rights. The other thing that's happened is that Texas statute, Senate Bill 8, which has set off vigilantes to enforce and get a $10,000 reward for reporting anyone participating in aiding or abetting an abortion. So this is a constitutional amendment proposal to establish in our Constitution an individual right to reproductive freedom, and it names some of the areas that are covered, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and infertility. In each one of these areas, the legislature has attempted to put an overlay on them that interferes with an individual right to make their own personal decisions. It would allow the state to prohibit abortion after fetal viability, but with some of the restriction that they couldn't prohibit if an abortion was to save a patient's life or the physical or mental health of the patient. And these next ones are responding to Senate Bill 8, Texas Senate Bill 8, forbids state discrimination and enforcement of the right, prohibit prosecution of an individual or people helping a pregnant individual for exercising rights established by this amendment. And importantly, it would invalidate all state laws, including the 1931 Michigan law outlawing abortion from the moment of conception with criminal penalties. Also, the only exception, I believe, would be for the imminent death of the mother. So here's how to sign up, reproductivefreedom.org. And the board voted to support this in February as well. Now, there are other things out there that we haven't taken action on. And I'm going to go, we've been going here for 50 minutes or so. I'm going to go through this rest of this pretty quickly. My right to vote, which is out of Ypsilanti and part of the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, is suggesting two constitutional amendments. A, is named A, reforms the initiative process. So this 40 days that the legislature gets to vote in an initiated statute would be abolished, and instead any initiated law goes directly to the ballot without a stop at the legislature. It's called direct initiative rather than indirect initiative. We are one of two states with indirect initiative. It expands this 180-day window to 2 years. So we give, and we have winters here, and then so expanding 180 days would be, I think, a blessing. Expands the deadline for referendum 90 days at the 90 days of at the end of a legislative term to 6 months following enactment of the law. To me, this is quite sensible. And it eliminates it says that if you put an appropriation in a bill, it is subject to referendum. It can't make it referendum proof. Provide generally that no new law covering the same subject matter rejected by the people by referendum shall be enacted except by a vote of the voters. You recall that they did the emergency manager thing. It was voted in and then the legislature took action to mess with it. So that's a loophole that my right to vote A is suggesting for the ballot. This one, my right to vote B, is kind of like promote the vote, but a little bit different. And if you want to know more about it, I think the best thing to do is to go to myrighttovote.com and read more about it. There are some aspects of it that are almost exactly the same and some aspects that are different. And My Right to Vote has elected to do a head-to-head comparison between My Right to Vote B and Promote the Vote 2022. I suggested to Jan Vendor, who is the mind behind this, that what the voters want to see is a comparison of My Right to Vote versus Secure My Vote, not take after somebody that's trying to do something similar. She said she'll consider doing that. But anyway, the head-to-head comparison is there, very critical of My Right to Vote. Now, Jan Vendor, the brains behind this, is a former deputy election administrator. And a lot of these provisions are from the viewpoint of a progressive election administrator. In other words, administrative convenience is boiled into the process. Whereas Promote the Vote says, we want 9 days of early voting. We don't care how you do it. You figure it out. Just we want 9 days of early voting. So it's a different approach. Now these AAUW has taken a position opposing the two proposed initiated laws mirroring vetoed legislation that would set up a scholarship fund to which anybody could donate and would receive a 100% income tax deduction. And this scholarship fund that people would donate to, people could apply for scholarships to pay for K through 12 public or private school tuition and fees, homeschooling materials, online learning programs, for those with financial needs. But public school students are limited to $500 scholarships, which is really kind of offensive. It blatantly violates Michigan's constitutional ban on the use of public monies for directly or indirectly to aid non-public schools, parochial or non-parochial. Ours is one of the strongest constitutional provisions. Governor's office says this would reduce this scholarship fund that's income tax deductible, would reduce state revenue by $500 million a year. However, more than 20 other states have similar programs, but they don't have our constitutional amendment that's so strong either. So I think there's some legal problem with this. Now, they've had to file financial reports, and former US Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and her family members have given $350,000 to support Let My Kids Learns, to initiated law proposals. And they also got $800,000 from Get Families Back to Work, a group sharing the same office address as the Republican Governors Association, nearly $500,000 from the State Government Leadership Foundation, a conservative nonprofit, 25 grand from Great Lakes Education Projects, Advocacy Arm, that's a Betsy DeVos funded thing. And $100,000 from Michigan Guardians for Democracy, which we saw earlier had financed Secure My Vote and Audit Michigan, and Audit Michigan. So none of these kind of groups are required to disclose their donors. They're 501c4s. So we urge you not to sign either one of these, and be very careful. Read the 100 words on the petition before you sign it. I'll say that again. Now here's the newest one. Voters for Transparency and Term Limits filed last week. It would amend the state constitution to reduce the maximum length a lawmaker can serve in the legislature from 14 years to 12 years, but would allow them to serve the full tenure in one chamber, like 12 years in the House or 12 years in the Senate, or they could do 6 in the House and 4 in the Senate. So currently there's a 6-year limitation on Michigan House members and 8 years of the Senate. And the minute people get to the House, they start looking for which Senate seat are they going to run for, so that they can get 14 years. It would also require state lawmakers, the governor, secretary of state, state attorney general to disclose certain. We are one of 2 states with no financial disclosure requirements of these state lawmakers. And the internal aspect of the proposal says that it has to be as good as what Congress is required to disclose, which isn't very good, frankly. So public comments were due yesterday, so I don't know who is opposing this. I also read somewhere that they're trying to find the 2/3 vote they would need in the House and Senate to put it on the ballot without going the voter signature petition route. So that may yet happen. The Board of State Canvassers meets March 23rd to approve their 100-word summary and their form. And there's a prominent union bug in full size on page 2 of their form. I looked at it last night. So the backers of it are an interesting conglomerate, bipartisan. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, Democrat, former House Speaker Jace Bolger, a Republican who's on Off the Record last Friday, and you can go to wkar.org and listen to him talk about it. Labor Union Unite Here, a big union in Michigan. A former Chamber of Commerce CEO, Rich Studley, the former AFL-CIO president, Wayne State University board member, Mark Gaffney. I've worked with him before on other petition drives, frankly. So they've got a celebrity bunch of backers, which means money will flow. But I do think they'd like to put it on the ballot for free. So I'm going to stop here and not go into talking about redistricting commission because we're running out of time. You know, I'm especially interested in hearing what you think about that term limits proposal, because the board of AAUW of Michigan board hasn't had a chance, of course, to meet and consider it. So,
Okay, Mary, maybe let's look in the chat thing first to see if they have any questions for you while you still have it in your brain here, what we just said. I can't find the chat. I've got it here. It's just not showing. Oh, yeah. Some people want to know if you would share your slides later.
yeah,
Okay.
we can put it up. Leah can put it up on the website as a PDF.
That would be great. Okay. And another question was, in an initiated statute, do you need an appropriation included in the petition in order to bypass the governor's signature?
No, it's an
what I thought.
initiated statute doesn't require anything. It just bypasses the governor.
And we do have a comment here that term limits would decrease the time that the people would be able to serve in the Michigan legislature. That's correct, right? From 14 years to 12.
Yeah, 12 lifetime years.
Right.
Potentially now, 14 is the maximum.
Right, okay. And there was another question. It says, which petitions are being circulated now? And I'm not, do you know? Can you
Well,
say?
this last one, of course, isn't.
Not. Right,
And because of the bug, the union bug debacle, most of, Raise Michigan, Reproductive Freedom for All, Promote the Vote, all of them that were waiting, had to scramble around. And what happened at the board was after those first two were deadlocked, Mark Brewer was representing the Raise Michigan and Reproductive Freedom for All, and he wasn't clear that day what could be done. But I understand they're complying, but they had to go back to their printer and redesign. The others that day on February 11th said, we'll comply. And so the vote by the board was to give them conditional approval, subject to coming into the board of the Bureau of Elections and showing that the union bug, if they had one, was 8-point font. And so some of these are at the printer right now and are just going to be distributed this week and this weekend and next week. And so we're in a transition from approval to getting it on paper and getting it out there. By the way, that union bug problem, size problem, affects many candidates who put the union bug on their nominating petitions and went out and got signatures. So after that February 11th board meeting, some candidates are very concerned about that.
Oh, bad.
And went out and reprinted their nominating petitions and started all over again. So that's hundreds of people and their nominating petitions.
Right.
So that is very serious.
I think if other people want to have comments, if you'd raise your hand on using the things at the bottom there, the reactions, if you raise your hand, it'll bring your, because we have two screens of people here, so it's sort of hard to figure out. So if anyone would like to ask a question or something, just unmute yourself and go for it, because I don't see anybody with a hand raised. Oh, Jerry.
Yeah, Mary, I think that business with the bug was a problem for Gretchen Whitmer, but and so we were all running around getting a petition signed for Governor Whitmer. Then I understand that it was rescinded and the petitions would be.
Yeah, I saw a message last night on Facebook saying that the governor's
right
nominating petitions didn't have a problem after all. The petitions I saw for her and that I circulated didn't have a bug on them at all.
Oh,
So I think that's how they solved it. But congressional candidates, usually Democrats who used a bug, have had to redesign their nominating. And once you redesign, you have to go through the Bureau of Elections to get it blessed. So all this takes time. And frankly, before I retired in at the end of 2010, I was the manager of a board for state government. And I have to tell you that the Bureau of Elections is underfunded, understaffed, overworked, and as a result, poorly administered. There are lots of things that they could do for the Board of State Canvassers to be more transparent, but they don't do them. In fact, a bill was just passed yesterday requiring them to do monthly reports on the status of each petition. I mean, it's just, they are opaque because they do not have staff and wherewithal to be more transparent. I think they might like to be, but they're cautious about it. And So it's a shame because there are a lot of us, and then we are a subscriber to Gongwer, and I'm in some communications with the Gongwer News Service publisher about their coverage. They can't do good coverage because the Bureau of Elections isn't transparent. So it's a problem all around state government. And we're one of the few states that has the ability of voters to initiate statutes and to initiate constitutional amendments. So this is a big thing here. Now, California is well known for having bedsheet ballots of many propositions.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have that. It's a little bit harder here than in California. But I really do want to hear from you about extending term limits. Do you like the idea of having people serve more time? You know, we have speakers of the House that only have served 2 years in the House before becoming speaker.
Mhm.
We have Appropriations Committee chairs only serving 2 years as a committee member and then becoming chair.
Mhm.
I mean-
Allison, I see you like to
Yeah.
comment.
No, I wanted to comment on term limits. I've been opposed to term limits since they were first proposed.
Me too.
And one of the reasons is sitting in Mary Pollock's chair, how complicated, how intricate all of this process of legislation is. And folks who have no background in it and then get elected, you need to have some experience. You need to learn the ropes, so to speak, because there's so much that's accomplished by discussion, conversation, in terms of the legislative process, that I think term limits is not a good idea. I think it's important that the people that we elect that reflect our opinions have the opportunity to learn the ropes and how to be effective.
Mhm. Thank you. I agree with that. Karen?
I agree totally with Allison. I too have been opposed to them since the beginning, and largely for the fact that there is no institutional memory in the legislature now.
Right.
The only people that have that are people like Mary and other government relations / lobbyists / influencers, because they've been around. They know what has happened and why something has happened. So I think we're making a big mistake to not have that institutional memory.
Anyone else have comments here? I happen to agree with you 100%. I've always said that. It's just the nope. And there's another state that had the same kind of term limits that we did, and we were all having the same problems, as I recall. I mean, nobody knew what was up. You know, the staff were more able to get things done than the person we elected.
I do think that the financial disclosure piece, they paired the term limits change to financial disclosure. Now, that's probably not sexy enough for the public to glom onto, but
Wise.
it will
Yeah.
discourage, that financial disclosure will discourage a lot of people who are conflicted. I mean, we have no financial, there are ethics rules that the House and the Senate has. These are kind of voluntary. You're supposed to say if you own a business affected by some regulation matter that you're voting on, but they routinely don't do it. They don't disclose their ethical conflicts. If you had financial disclosure up front, it would discourage the people who are in it for the money, you know, and not to serve the public. And I think the term limits is going to get all the attention, but I think this financial disclosure would change the nature of who runs. I mean, frankly, would you like the public to know. I mean, I was an elected official, a city council member in Illinois. And I constantly said I wasn't going to run again because there is no privacy in public life. I mean, you have to be willing to open your life to scrutiny. Would Lee Chatfield have been able to do what he did if he had to serve like 4, 6, 8 years before he became Speaker of the House?
Right.
His lifestyle would have shown, and his colleagues would have known more about him before
Right.
they elected him Speaker.
Mhm.
So
I
I
see
think longevity
Bonnie.
also prevents some problems. like
I see
that.
Bonnie would like to ask or add
Hi.
something.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm confused about the limits issue. And I wondered if if we could at least try a clearer language. No limits, I understand. Shorter limits or longer limits, okay, rather than decreasing the limits or increasing. So does this, would this petition shorten the limit or extend it a little bit? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
I agree.
I think your confusion is well placed. It reduces lifetime limits
Mhm.
and it extends the number of years you can serve in one chamber. So it does both. That's why it's confusing. I think you've identified a major point that the proponents of this, a stumbling point that they will have to explain. Why did they do 12 years and not 16 years?
Mhm.
16 years would be 4 terms in the Senate or 8 terms in the House or a combination. My guess is they chose 12 because they could advertise that we're reducing the lifetime limit while expanding the number of years to be served in one house.
Yeah.
So I think, Bonnie, you've
Hit the nail.
hit a talking point.
Right. Allison.
Yeah, just one more question, not about term limits. The slide that you put up about, and I'll just call it loosely, the abortion petition, the second item on it looked like, if I read it correctly, and I may not have, that it would limit abortion in Michigan after fetal viability. Is that right?
Yeah, but there were exceptions.
That's
Yeah.
like a lot of the anti-abortion laws.
It would allow the state of Michigan to prohibit abortion after fetal viability, which currently is 22, 23 weeks, unless the state could not limit abortions after fetal viability if the abortion was needed to protect a patient's life,
Yeah,
or her physical or mental health.
it's my bad. I was confusing it with fetal heart rate, which so many of them are using as the point of reference. Yes, fetal viability, it's a lot later. Okay,
Yeah,
that's my bad.
That's what Roe v. Wade
Right,
basically has set up these. Well, at
Right.
first it was 3 trimesters, and
Right.
then subsequent US Supreme Court decisions changed it, kind of fetal viability.
Okay, so unless I see another hand, I'm going to thank all of you for coming. We have 50 people here. This is just, as Mary said, this is quite a bit larger than our political active group. It's like 10 times as large. And so I
thank you
really,
for
really
making it
appreciate
statewide.
Now, when I send this to Leah to put on the website, it's going to have some, what I did was I went into the Redistricting Commission's page, website, and I did Birmingham for you.
Oh, good.
And you're in an odd shaped state and house district. And a little bit about the redistricting commission and the challenges to it. There are
That's
two
great.
outstanding challenges right now. I don't think either one of them are winners, frankly.
Okay.
Unless the Detroit Black Caucus comes up with a federal lawsuit based on the Voting Rights Act. Actually, you can file a lawsuit at any time. There's no time limit. There's no statute of limitations. So people could file after the next election if they don't like how it turned out. So
Jerry?
anyway, that will be on that PowerPoint.
Jerry, are you just waving or?
No, I'm not waving. I have a quick question. Mary, what's the website you go to find out what districts you're now in?
Okay, the website is michigan.gov/MICRC.
MICR.
Stands for Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting
thank you.
Commission.
Thank you.
And then you'll see very prominently there I'll share that screen.
Those shapes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate all the information, Mary. You always do an excellent job, and we appreciate all the work you're doing for us. So, and you all now know Mary, and you can just contact her directly.
Now, I do visit chapters, or I do presentations like this from many of the chapters. All you need to do is invite me and we'll set up a time.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.